Welcome to European Journeys. This is the third stage of a series that takes us to Norway, where we explore the Christianization of the nation. For our previous stage, we were exploring the town of Haugesund along the western coast of Norway. And for this stage, we are going to visit a town, or small village really, that is located at about 70 kilometers north from the town of Haugesund. It is located in the county named Vestland, on an island which is named Stord, and that island is reachable by car because there is a bridge that connects the island to the mainland. And the village in question is named Fitjar. It is located along the sea. And in that village, we find a very ancient church, a wooden church. And next to that church, there is a park named Haakon Parken. At the heart of the park, we find a statue of a man standing with his sword and with a helmet, looking like a soldier, in fact. And at the base of the statue, what we find is a cross on one side, and then on another side there is an old Norwegian sentence which reads, and I will try to read it as best as I can, I apologize for the pronunciation, but this is what it reads: Med logum shall land bygja. That is in English, with law shall the land be built. Now, who is that statue representing? Well, in fact, that soldier was none other than an ancient king of Norway named Haakon the Good. He was a king that ruled over Norway in the 10th century. And let's look a little bit at this statue because it has a lot to tell us about Haakon the Good and also about the Christianization of the country. Firstly, we see him standing with a sword, with a helmet as a soldier, looking quite victorious. But in fact, the reason we find a statue of Haakon here is that it was there in Fitjar that he died in battle during the Battle of Fitjar in the year 961. So it looks quite odd that he would stand here seemingly as victorious as it were, even though it was there that he fell. So why was it so? Well, maybe if we explore his life, we might find an answer to to the reason why he is depicted in such a way. Haakon the Good was born in around the year 920. His father was Harald Fairhair. You remember in our previous episode we talked about him. Harald Fairhair had many sons before the birth of Haakon. And before the birth of Haakon, in fact, another son of Harald, Eric Blood Axe, a nickname that was well chosen for him, had attempted and quite almost succeeded to kill all his brothers in order to become the sole ruler of Norway once his father would pass away. But when Haakon was born, his father, knowing the danger that his other son represented, wanted to protect Haakon. And so he sent him as a little boy, as an infant really, to the court of England. Now at the time, the king of England was King Ethelstan. He was a Christian king. And so what he did was that he took the boy, baptized him in the Christian faith, and raised him in the Christian faith. As a result, Haakon became a Christian himself. Then at the age of 13, when Haakon was 13 years old in the year 933, his father Harald died. Eric became the king over Norway, and as we can imagine, he became a quite harsh ruler. The population was quite displeased with the rule of Eric, and in the meantime, Haakon was getting ready to return to Norway. He was being trained to become a ruler there in Norway, and Ethelstan equipped him with an army in order to return to Norway and be able to confront his brother. Then eventually he left England with ships and landed near what is today Trondheim, and there confronted his brother. And the war between the two lasted less than a year. His brother Eric understood that he was about to lose the war and therefore fled first to Denmark, then to England, where he died there in battle once again. Haakon therefore became the sole ruler over Norway, and he will rule over his country for about 25 years. And his rule was rather peaceful, up until 25 years later, the sons of Eric attacked him by surprise. And that's when we end up into that famous battle of Fitjar. And as we have seen, this is where Haakon died. Now, the chronicler, the Icelandic chronicler Snorri Sturluson, tells us quite an interesting story about this battle. In fact, Haakon, before dying, had communicated that he was in fact ready to give the kingdom to the sons of Eric, not necessarily because he wanted to save his life, but because he had only a daughter, and at the time, kingship was only transmitted to men, not to women. Therefore, he was ready to hand over the kingdom to the sons of Eric. But the message didn't arrive to the sons of Eric in time, so says Snorri Sturluson. And the chroniclers, in fact, tell us that both the supporters and the enemies of Haakon even lamented the death of Haakon. So that's for an overview of history. And the reason why he stood there, maybe, is because the battle was won by the army of Haakon. Even though Haakon had to die, the battle was nonetheless won by his own army. There is another element on that statue that is worth looking at, and that's that famous sentence that by the law, with the law, a land shall be built. Now, why is that related with Haakon? Well, if we go back into his childhood, you remember, as I said, he was raised in England by King Etherstan, who was a Christian, but not only he was a Christian, England had been Christianized. That is, the laws of the country had been Christianized, and that had happened about 100 years before his arrival there in England, through a king named Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great had taken a lot of laws that came from the Bible directly and made it into the law code of England, and that will in fact shape the British tradition of law-making for centuries. Well, Haakon saw what kind of society England was, and he wanted to have that same kind of society in Norway. So his scope was to Christianize Norway. Now, that didn't mean that he would only make the laws of the nation Christian. He didn't start with that. Firstly, he planted churches and placed priests that he had brought back from England with him to Norway. And so he began to plant churches all over the country. Then eventually, after several years, he began to attempt to have the parliament of Norway adopt the Christian law for the country. And this happened in particular at the specific moment when he reached the main parliament of the country, the Frostathing, and began to argue with the members of the parliament to try to convince them to adopt the Christian law for Norway, to adopt Christianity first of all, and then to adopt the Christian law for the country. Well, adopting Christianity didn't seem to be much of a problem for the members of the parliament, but nevertheless, when Haakon began to explain what kind of law should be adopted, that's where opposition began to rise. He wanted, first of all, to make one day out of 7 a day of rest, a day of worship to the Lord of Christianity. And also, we have to remember it was the Roman Catholic era, and Roman Catholicism insisted also that Friday should be a day of fasting, and he wanted to adopt that in the law of the country. Well, these suggestions were too much for the members of the parliament, and they rejected wholesale Christianity. So that was a lashback a little bit. It was a setback, I would say. And as a result, the pagan priests of the nation began to be afraid that the nation would be taken away from them, and they therefore tried to paganize the country, to make paganism really the official religion of the country. And they temporarily succeeded. And Haakon, in fact, it is said that towards the end of his life even, he bowed down to the request of the pagan priest to make him perform some pagan rites, and he would lament that over the rest of his life and be penitent towards God for that. So Haakon the Good did not succeed in Christianizing the land, but nevertheless he began to break the ice, as it were. He was an icebreaker very much for the nation of Norway, and it won't take long before the law of the nation will be Christianized. It will take a few decades after his death. But so Haakon was a very important figure for the Christianization of the country nonetheless, and we will discover, in fact, that what he did was very much a pioneering work over the country. I'm Cedric Placentino. See you next time for another stage of European Journeys.